Hi, I'm Fawnde. Welcome back. This is the 11th DM Diary of the Throne of Rihdar. There are a few things I would like to talk about today that make this a special, I suppose, diary and session as well. Unfortunately, we've encountered one of those issues where life gets in the way of D&D. It's not to the level of where the game is cancelled or anything like that. But one of our players has got a new job, and of course that job happens to fall in line with making his schedule very unpredictable. So he has stepped away from our game. So Stavros, our only human and the commander of the squad, played by Shamib, will be stepping away from our game for the foreseeable future. If he ever has the ability to come back, we'll let him back. There may come a point where I'd talked to this with the players during the session, where we may invite someone else here soon. So we've been thinking about ideas about replacing a player, because I genuinely believe I've played with 4 people. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think having a 5th at least would be more fun in the moment and allow me to make more difficult combats as well. But we'll see how that goes. But just understand, during this entire session, Stavros, the player, was not here, and I was playing him until we got to a point where we could say farewell to him as a character, because it wouldn't make sense for him to just pee poof vanish like dust in the wind for no reason. We have to keep verisimilitude, and as such we have to find a reason, and thankfully there's a pretty decent reason for him to leave. But that is one of the things, the key factors of this session, and going to be for prior sessions. But that's out of the way. This week our players get back, and they're still in this awkward situation. They quickly realize, and they berate Stavros a little bit, and they talk amongst each other, particularly Kira and Hawkins. They talk to each other about how are we going to amend this problem. Not necessarily for the fact that they feel really bad about what's happened. It was awkward, and they definitely think it was over the top and not necessary to get violent. They could just use words. So they realize that Shlomo Pigrider is somewhat a bard who likes to tell stories and has a pretty big mouth. So if they're on his bad side, which I wasn't even really thinking about this at the time, but Hawkins was. So they're on his bad side, and he decides to start telling everyone their information. That will be bad for them. So they start trying to figure out ways to more or less help smooth things over and say sorry. Maybe they'll tell more information, maybe not. But Stavros, me playing as him, says we should let him wait till the morning. So the party more or less decides, okay, that's fine, and everyone goes to bed. Everyone ends up trying to share the master bedroom given by Brenda Ildgut, besides Stavros goes to his own room, and there the 4 of them stand looking out this master bedroom window. It overlooks this lake that in the moon, there's not a moon, I said moonlight, and I keep thinking about it. There's not moonlight on Orbitus, there's no moon. But the lights from the rings are sparkling down upon the lake. As the lights sparkle in your eyes, they sit there for a moment and they realize things are pretty good. They finally are clean. They've had an actual meal, not just rations. They're in civilization again. They are still, of course, bounded to Kronos through the muzzling, through these collars around their neck. So they're still bounded to him and their obligations. But compared to the last 2 weeks, things are much, much better, as they all stand there together and have this brief moment, individually, but also as a group moment, looking out this window. And everything seems good. But then suddenly, Kira gets a message in her head. Something that happens quite often, a message from her brother that says, Kira, or Talbeth, why does no one know the name Talbeth? You haven't changed your name, have you? Ah, have you abandoned us again? My despicable sister? Basically confirming with Kira that that Beldroth, her brother, is in Tradoy now looking for her, and instantly ruins her mood as she goes to lay down. The others lay down as well. Newt, already mostly asleep, is put at the head of the bed. Hawkins, our lizard folk, forgot his name for a moment, I don't know how I did that, takes a bath and sleeps in the water for kind of to simulate his natural habitat. Then Kit, kind of feeling out of place, goes actually and takes his own room, the third room they had purchased. And Kit, kind of disappointed that the other two won't be joining him to flip the dream coin and meet the Dreamwalker, flips the coin himself and goes to bed to talk to the Dreamwalker. Now, in their sleep, I took Mo5 and Peebus away, the respective player of Kira and the player of Kit, as Mo5 ends up having a nightmare. Kira has a nightmare of them running and seeing their family all burned alive, watching the world tree being burned, as they hear the thumping of Herodicus, the god of the forge, hammering on the world tree that she accidentally set on flame, as she meets Sarul, her teacher who had tricked her, and she runs up his arms, unable to escape, as she calls out for help in this nightmare, unable to do anything. Kit hears it. Kit is talking to the Dreamwalker, and he realizes that Kit has unlocked some powers to walk in the dreams. There's something I used that I had gotten from, I believe his name is a DM coach. It's called bonus level up perks. So things my players do, or they seem to be into, or things I might think they might like, I give them options. And whenever they level up, they may get an extra perk based on what they've done during this level up. And one of the things Kit has done had been involved in dreams a lot. So he now has the power to some extent, invade other people's dreams. And the Dreamwalker, a creature specializing in this, has noticed. And it's also a creature that, for the most part, is connected to Kit. It was set free indirectly by the person who dreamed up Kit, and by some extent, is almost like a brother to Kit. They were both born in the Dreamlands, just in different ways. But, beyond that, the Dreamwalker offers to teach Kit some of its ways as they go to help Kira. There, Kira is introduced to the Dreamwalker, who offers to get rid of these nightmares in exchange for good dreams or something else. But Kira, stubborn as always, violent and vigilant in her sorrows and repentance as always, strongly says no. Similar to many of the other party members. However, she actually sees the Dreamwalker as more of a demon. She doesn't seem to be swayed by its tricks and seems to really lock onto its appearance. Perhaps this is because they've been in town already, and they've heard the rumors of the people who claim it's a demon, and then of the people who claim it's a hero. And she is talking to people who literally have taught it a demon not to trust it. So perhaps that's why she's more suspicious of it than the others who had been introduced to him before. But maybe at the same time she has been caught a little bit off guard, since Kit is there, and she realizes Kit is actually there. At least she thinks. So maybe that has lowered her guard to this creature as well. But no matter what, she will not take a deal from the Dreamwalker. She will not give this dream away. She will not give this away at all for anything else, no matter how much he tries to say things or switch it around. But he flips her a coin and says, if you ever wish to change your mind, please just flip the coin and we can make a deal. As easy as that. As he snaps and sends her back to the dream. Then he talks to Kit some briefly, and then he sends him back to the real world. Where there in the morning, Kit and Kira briefly talk, as they realize that they were both there. And Mo5 had explained that Kira now has a better respect for Kit, which I don't quite understand. I as a DM don't quite understand why Kira holds Kit in high regards or likes him more because of that, because he didn't really do too much. So I as a DM don't quite understand that part of Kira as a character, and maybe I won't understand it until more of it is brought out, which I find interesting. It's almost like a secret to me as well, because I can't really read the mind of Mo5, so I don't understand why Kira would feel closer to Kit. But Mo5 had mentioned that she does, which I thought was very interesting. But after that, they go downstairs. They re-meet Miranda, who briefly talks to them, and they decide after talking, they did a little bit of out-of-character talking, which is fine, which I actually appreciate and support. They end up going to Miranda, who asks them if they are they going to go to the Maple Springs, because the night before, the party who came in after Stavros had said that they were here to investigate the Maple Springs. So she has been believing that they were here on this mission. So they talk, and they ultimately decide they will, but they don't really have any of their gear. Most of them are missing their weapons and various things. But they decide they'll go investigate, and if it's something really dangerous, they will run away. That is their plan. But they get breakfast. They talk to Victor the cook, who once again is kind of irritated by them, and they banter around about putting spit in their drinks and things like that. And eventually they get their breakfast and eat, and they sit down and they talk to Mirinda, who basically debriefs them on the vandalism of the Maple Springs and informs them that this had happened about a month ago. It started, at least, with some weird moss growing around, but it didn't become major until 2 weeks ago. Suddenly, overnight, 2 weeks ago, all of the major springs that are used commercially were taken over. Now, there are a few springs that the locals use, but those cannot be used by the business. So overnight, 2 weeks ago, all the springs were ruined, which has destroyed all the tourism, has made, and has spread like wildfire through the nation. Their economy is being destroyed, and that's why they're desperately trying to fix it. So the party, agreeing, says they'll go investigate, but not before they need to go get Stavros. Stavros has not came out of his room, so they all go upstairs to see him. Upstairs, they knock on his door, or they open his door, and they're greeted by a giant bear, Multitude, and one of the leading members of Twilight Redemption, one of the Hands of Orbitus. He is there to retrieve Stavros. It turns out Stavros, which I may have mentioned before, had made a deal with Francis. The deal was, you cover for us for some time, and then I will tell you a secret of mine. So Francis had covered against and basically lied to Kronos the Shamed, but now that they know he did that, they're here to collect him and serve him his punishment, Stavros' punishment. So Multitude, obviously not very interested in him and very racist against humans, is mocking him, saying he could only expect, not even a week after being given a second chance by His Majesty, he betrays him, he bites the hand that feeds him. That is the cunning of man. The evil of man has no bounds. And he is glad to bring them back, and he actually thanks Stavros for doing so, because maybe now the other members of the Hands of Orbitus will understand how dangerous humans are and how little they should be trusted. But he kind of ignores the others as they try and talk to him. But Newt, realizing Mirinda's situation, brings up to Multitude. Earlier, Mirinda had brought up that she used to really be a fan of Kronos the Humble. That was the name of Kronos the Shamed when he was a hero during the Crimson Riot, and after he caught the petal killer. But she seems to have given up hope, as she had fantasies of a hero coming and sweeping her away. But now that Kronos the Shamed is shamed and has become a villain, she's given up hope. But Newt briefly mentions that Mirinda here seems to be interested in their Majesty. Multitude is not very interested, though. He congratulates the party that they now have a chance to show that they're not human lovers, that they're not on the side of humans, as he takes Stavros away. Stavros, in his last moments, gives a staff that he had snuck away from Sothis' lair to Kira, and on it is a letter. He also gives a bottle of wine he had bought previously for Father Caban to Newt, to more or less maybe help their exchange, as they climb out the window and they leave. The party read the letter. It's a farewell letter from Stavros, telling them that he is more or less being taken away. He may die. He does not know his fate, but he hopes that his sacrifice will lead them to do better things, that they should grow in strength and prepare themselves, for they do not know what Kronos the Shamed may do, if it's good or bad, and they must grow stronger just in case. That is his advice and what he asked of them as he leaves. Multitude had also given a letter to Hawkins from High Commander Balk, the other Lizardfolk commander of Twilight Redemption. But as they leave, before we get into that, Mo5, who plays Kira, as I'd mentioned last time, has done another moment of proving me that they're truly part of this world in many ways, and also surprising me with their character. Kira, in the last moments, runs to the window that they climbed out of and walking away and yells simply, "Thank you," to Stavros. Something that might seem not like much, but to me as a DM, that small interaction, that small roleplay right there, was everything. It means everything. Because that is something that would happen in the world It shows the connection, the drive to roleplay even the smaller things, and to make this moment of losing Stavros, someone you traveled with for so long, losing your commander, someone their characters have been with for so long, even more meaningful. It meant a lot. Hawkins would do something similar that we're getting to now. But Stavros, after hearing thank you, would just simply raise his hand and not look back, and go off into the distance of multitude. Upon reading the letter, they would realize that Stavros was their commander, and Stavros is not there anymore, so by order of the squad, once you lose your commander, usually often in battle or some other ways, the new commander is the one who is to be appointed. Stavros had decided Hawkins, a strategist, would be promoted commander. So, suddenly, out of nowhere, just last night they were having a moment of thinking things are going to get better together at that window. Disaster happens, going from a normal day to suddenly commander. Shot, Hawkins is now in charge of the squad. He's now in charge of everyone's lives, their decisions, and such. The letter he got from Balk was congratulating him and asking him of a favor. I'm not sure if he actually read that, but he was officially appointed as commander. In the moment, he yells out, "Stavros! Stavi!" That's not his voice, but he had called out, realizing the situation and how awful it was. Hawkins had wanted to be promoted as commander, but not this way. This was not a way to be promoted as commander. It was not fulfilling, it was just sad. It was nothing but sad, disappointing, lackluster, awful to be promoted as commander because of this. In that moment, the party had determined that if Cronus Ashamed does anything wrong to Stavros, over the necessary level, they would never forgive them. They don't know what they'll do, but in that moment, they made somewhat of a mental vow to do something. But they all realized also as they're making that vow, I could tell, as a DM watching them in character, as players and characters, tried to come up with a reason of if they do anything to Stavros, that they would do something, but they couldn't really say what they would do. And I realized that they realized in that moment how weak they were. They don't have enough power to do anything. They'd mentioned maybe they should attack Multitude and save Stavros. They could have tried, but I think even in that moment they doubted if they were strong enough to beat Multitude. They are so weak. It's been pounded into them. I as a DM have pounded into them how weak they are. And it's got to the point where they realize it. To the point whenever they wish to do something, they don't have the power. And that made Stavros' last farewell even more powerful. I had Ashmeeb out of game to write a letter or a voice recording or something for the party as a farewell, and that's what he wrote. So his last letter of telling them that it's stronger to be able to protect themselves and stop things or prepare for the worst rings even more true. For they are nothing more than a bunch of empowered peasants for the most part. Their strength is not enough. But that is the moment they had. As they all go back downstairs realizing the situation, they decide to still go off to the Maple Springs. They follow Miranda, who leads them there, and Miranda kind of has a few moments of, there was a lot of silence, and Miranda tried to fill the silence, but ended up kind of ranting and venting to the rest of them. Kira had kind of already known her situation with her father and how she couldn't leave, but she ended up opening up, perhaps indirectly, and telling the party too much about how she would love to be adventurous, and how what it means to be an adventurer, and how many stories she's had, and how she wishes she could have it. But then they return and they return and say they never wish to be adventurous. They don't enjoy it, which shows the disparity between what Miranda sees as an adventure and what they see as an adventurer. She wishes for the freedom, but the party realize that there is no freedom. Becoming an adventurer does not set you free, and to potentially make it even worse. For example, the situation they're in now. So they get even more of a stark reality of their situation through Miranda, who is this young elven girl who has never got to really experience the world because her adopted father keeps her here, keeps her enslaved in this town. And she wishes to become an adventurer because to her that is what it means. She's been told that to be an adventurer is to follow your dreams, to chase after the things you wish for. But the party realizes that to be an adventurer is not freedom. It is hell, it is torture, it is to face horrors and have to handle situations you do not wish to have to handle, such as the ones they've had in the last 2 weeks. They became slaves, they've lost their commander, they became outcasts, even more than they already were. They felt nothing besides awful times, and even in their shallow victories, there's always something worse to follow it up. So to them, this young elven girl thinking about this, they can't relate, and it's off-putting to her as well. But after that, they go to the Middle Springs where they begin to investigate. They find a few tracks, some tracks of what seems to be vegetables, and a weird track that looks like almost like a snake or a tail of a creature or something. And they enter a skill check to more or less see how they investigate and to what they can find. And they end up succeeding, and because they succeeded, they end up finding a preserved helmet of a vegetation. And at this point, my players were finally starting to get a lot of information and starting to piece things together. They're starting to realize through their research that this may have been the Vegetans, or maybe someone framing them, or it may be Aldania. They got so much information that things are starting to piece together. And I, as a DM, watching this encounter and watching them get all this information and try to understand it was both super fulfilling and also super scary for me. Because I've mentioned it before, but me as a DM, I really enjoy the small things, the information that you can piece together, and if you're really perceptive and remember things, you can piece together this information and reveal things that you didn't know, and more or less understand the story before I as a DM just put in your face. You can find things, understand things, catch people in the process of doing stuff, and save things. And that's how I like to be as a player, so it translates to me as a DM. So my players are hearing this information, and they're starting to piece together that this may not be the Vegetans, maybe they're set up, or maybe Aldania was here, and then someone preserved the footsteps of these footprints and this hat to try and frame Aldania and the Vegetans. Or maybe Sothis was here, or maybe, then this is where it's crazy. I start giving them some information, and I try to give them some information they forgot about, but they didn't roll high enough, so I'm like, you guys, it was mentioned, but you guys didn't find it important, you guys didn't write it down, so you don't have it. I don't like always being strict, but there are some certain points where I like being strict with the information. If the players did not catch it, if they did not write it down, if they did not find it important, then, well, that's their loss. If they would have paid more attention to it and thought it was more important, maybe they'd have an extra piece of information to put in this puzzle to try and understand things. But they didn't. So that's when they start theorizing, and that's when I start sweating and I start having to bite my tongue because I really want to correct them and say some things. Some of their ideas were kind of right, some of their ideas were completely wrong, some of their ideas were absurd, some of them were like pretty dead on. But I sat there and watched. They'd said things like how creatures are being used to help so-and-so, and all these things where I'm like, oh my god, if they decide to act on this, that's gonna be bad. Because they don't realize, I as a DM, I understand everything, but they don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. So to them, and Kit, played by Peeves, more or less voiced that. He says, I feel like we probably don't have all the information here. So he more or less voiced that they're jumping to conclusions, which I thought was very nice. A very nice observation. But they're getting all these information, I'm like, oh god, if they start acting on this stuff that is wrong, or even like partially right but not fully right, I'm like, oh shit, that's bad. and they're still super suspicious of like the good NPCs who have like done nothing but good for them. They're still super suspicious of them and all kinds of nonsense. But it's very fulfilling that my players started to piece all this information together and start having things click. And it was even more fulfilling in the session whenever my players said that they really enjoyed it. That they really enjoyed this mystery that they're starting to understand, that they really enjoy how everything's connecting. And for me as a DM, that is one of the highest levels of praise and gratitude I can get is whenever my players appreciate all the information. The only thing I can appreciate more is if they took more notes, or they caught on to more of the things, or they remembered more things. There are times I do little hints that seem meaningless, and I can't ever expect anyone to be like, oh, that must be important. Whoa. That seem meaningless, but are actually somewhat relevant and important. And I don't expect them to be like, oh, that's important, and I should write that down because it's a note or something. But instead, they may remember off the top of their head and be like, whoa, that's what, and it might click. But who knows? Anyway, they get all this information, and they decide they're going to talk about it some more. But then they realize there's someone watching them. As they feel the gaze, Akira feels the very familiar gaze of sleepy-eyed Rufus. Instead of turning to look at him, they decide, under the commands of the new commander, they're going to run. Actually, I think Newt runs. Someone runs. As they all start running away, dragging Miranda with them. She was kind of confused about this entire situation. She doesn't really understand what they're talking about. They run. They turn around, they see Rufus sitting up on the ledge of this cliff above the spring that they were investigating, as he's just kind of watching them. Interested, Newt goes back and throws a grappling hook up to try and catch him as he went back and hid. So he's trying to follow him as the party all makes their way up there. Before they all leave, Miranda tells some very important information to Hawkins. And this is why I like NPCs who are kind of nice and smart, because they can really save the party. What she said to Hawkins was, she'd mentioned a few things about Sleepy-Eyed Rufus, how he once was an urban legend, and he's usually been pretty harmless, but even though he's usually pretty harmless and just likes watching people, he's still the leader of the River Rats, a bandit group. And if you allow a bandit to, if you give the bandit the opportunity to completely rob you, they will do so. And the party was trying to chase after him with almost none of their weapons, none of their gear. So hearing this, Hawkins decides to go up there and bring everyone back. So he goes up there. Sleepy-Eyed Rufus is nowhere to be found. They're on the edge of the Endless Peaks, which is one of the mountain ranges in Kadoy. And they come back down, but they've had a hard time trying to get up and down this grappling hook. And it gets to the point where Hawkins is about to fall, but instead he uses his claws to scratch into. What I had done is I said to him, he was about to fall. I said, you have two choices. Number one, you can try to make a death save and not do anything bad to the rope. But if you miss it up, you might fall, and whatever happens to you happens. Number two, you can use your claws, and you won't have to make a check. You can simply use your claws and shred this rope to pieces and make it down safe. So Hawkins decides to use his claws as a ligamen and shred the rope. So he shreds it, it's down, but then Newt, this is the consequence of that, Newt decides to get the grappling hook back, and as he yanks on it, I make him do a check, but the rope is so tattered that the rope snaps, and the grappling hook stays up top with about 10 feet hanging off, so he loses his grappling hook. Defeated, the party gets annoyed, but they decide to leave before anything else happens. As they walk back to the inn, they keep trying to ruminate over all the information they have, but they realize it's probably not that important right now, but it's some good things to think about what may have happened. As they get back to the inn, they are preparing to say goodbye to Miranda Eldroot, and that is where our session ends. This whole session was a little bit weird due to technical issues, and the VOD would be a little bit weird because of that too. But for the most part, I greatly enjoyed the session, and I was super happy that my players enjoyed the information. As a DM, I really, really, really value information and little pieces of clues and stuff, and whenever I see my players enjoying that and starting to piece things together, be it right or wrong, it makes me enjoy DMing so much more than I already do. So I'm very grateful to my players for playing, for engaging with the world, for being serious, for finding this information. And even though some of them don't take notes, and even though they're not as proactive and stuff as I am, sometimes at least, I am still very grateful that they put as much effort as they do into their game. And well, there's not much more to say about that. And I also want to thank anyone who watches these videos, anyone who watches the streams, anyone who supports me and my players in any way, however it is. Thank you guys. And this has been the 11th DM Diary. My name's Fawnde. If you wish to watch the Throne of Rihdar live, you can watch us every Saturday at 12 noon CST over at twitch.tv/FawndeTheJester. Otherwise, thank you very much. I hope you all have a lovely night, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.